Welcome to another hobby. I'm Austin, and today's hobby is comic creation, I suppose. More technically, I'm going to be doing some concept art for character design for a graphic novel that I've been working on for some time now. The character, I have some old images from around 2010 to 2012-ish of this character. These are all really kind of cartoony proportions, not really what the current form of the comic is supposed to look like. It's going to be a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to try and redesign this character and kind of bring him up to the more current standard I have for the graphic novel. You can see my original inspiration was kind of the triangle shape of like the Batman and Superman style characters with the really wide shoulders and then narrow waist and legs. And I might try and bring that forward into the new design, but I'm also going to sort of give myself room to just experiment and try completely new, different things that aren't like this at all. I'll kind of explain some of the character as I go, as it'll most likely come up in design choices I'm making along the way. So for this, I am looking for something kind of generic dude. He needs to be able to blend into backgrounds for plot reasons without standing out too much, so it limits my design a little bit unless I constantly have him in disguise or something like that. But being that the comic itself, it takes place in a fantasy world with a lot of variety as far as cultures and characters and even races, fantasy races go, so he's never going to totally fit into every scenario. The technology level is probably going to be a little bit pre-medieval for the most part, except for in some of the more advanced countries and cities where they have more resources. As far as this character's culture goes, what I have written for him so far in the story doesn't really specify, I guess. It doesn't really matter. He's kind of a lone free agent off doing his own thing. Doesn't have ties to other characters, so it leaves me more room as far as that goes for changing up the design. The original design I had for him, not necessarily noticeable in the images I showed earlier, but he is supposed to be particularly tall. That was kind of the one standout feature I decided to give him, since being tall can still let you blend in, but still give him something that is a little bit unique. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing here. I think I'm focusing more on the talking than the design and just kind of doing generic body shape. And this isn't helping too much, so I think I'm just going to move this out of the way. And I'm going to do a technique I've seen done a little bit for concept art, where you do really, really tiny silhouettes of just a bunch of different poses and shapes and see if any of them kind of stand out to you. Now for this one, like I said, he can't be too crazy looking, because if it stands out too much, then it kind of defeats the purpose of him blending in. But I think in this case, it might help to just do a few brief silhouettes and see how they look. For this character, they are sort of a villain. They don't really directly harm people, but they have a very unique belief system that makes them feel like everybody needs to be tested to reach their true potential, which leads them to kind of setting up situations where bad things happen to people, but the intention is good. They think it's helpful for people. He's also a little bit mentally unstable, also has like really high charisma, can be very like convincing when talking about his beliefs. Very confident, almost thinking like a cult leader or something like that. So I want to try and kind of work that into the design. You might notice my silhouettes keep getting bigger and bigger, because each time I try to come up with something that's not just the same silhouette over and over again, I end up adding more detail to it to kind of get it there, and I end up having to make it bigger to do that. So I'm going to try and kind of halt that process a bit, since the point of this exercise is to keep it small and really just the broad shapes. So let's shrink it back down. Physically, he's not necessarily supposed to be superimposing, but it could help with some of the charisma-based tactics if people see him as like a strong, confident character. And I want to avoid the trope of ugly equals bad, or fat equals bad, or physical deformations equals bad, so I'm going to try and avoid falling into that trap. I think having him potentially be overweight isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I don't want it to become a pattern to make the non-traditionally handsome people the bad people. Okay, so I'm not sure I'm going to get a whole lot more out of this process since, like I said, he's kind of can't stand out too much. So I think I'm going to try a couple sketches based on some of these silhouettes. I think the ones I like, I do want to try one with him being a little bit more kind of regular dad bod, just kind of slightly overweight, a little bit of a belly and a long coat, and just kind of nothing super special about him. And then I want to try one where he's maybe kind of a mix of these two, where he's, you know, tall and skinny rather than being kind of buff and broad-shouldered like I had originally. And then this bottom one here having more kind of baggy clothes on over top. And then I still might go back and try and do one that's a little bit more like the original one I had that is Batman shaped. So let's try a quick sketch here of the tall skinny one. One thing I was most likely going to do with this character is make him fairly wealthy or have some kind of access to resources, since he needs to be able to set things up in very specific ways to have events play out the way he wants, to test these cultures the way he thinks they need to be tested. So having him have some kind of wealth or connections or something along those lines will help with that. So it might be useful to have his design incorporate a little bit of that as far as like clothing and stuff goes, but it also might make sense for his character, who is fanatical, to potentially forego that kind of stuff because it doesn't matter to him. The thing I like about both of these body shapes is that either one could still be physically imposing potentially. The first one could be physically proficient in a quick, dexterous kind of way, and this one could be physically proficient in a heavyweight boxer kind of brawler sense. Lots of weight behind hits and being able to take more hits. So either of these could still work in a physically imposing kind of way if I want that to be part of the character too. Though for the most part, I do want this character to be, for their strength to be their mind and charisma and not their physicality. I think I still want them to be tall, and there's a couple ways you can indicate that without necessarily putting things in the image to compare them to. One way to do that is to shrink the head and the feet. So if the head is slightly smaller, suddenly they look a lot taller. And I think I want to do that with both of these poses. The feet one isn't quite as important because sometimes you want your tall character to also have big feet. I mean, tall people often do have larger feet. I guess while I'm here, I may as well do one more for the original design I had. Okay, so that's some body bases down. I feel like the proportions on this skinny one, something not quite right about them. I'm not sure what it is, and it's making me want to do this one less than the others, and I don't know if that's necessarily fair assessment of whether or not the design is good, because I think I've just kind of messed up on drawing out the body shape, unfortunately. I could try and fix it up, tune it up a little bit like I'm doing here, but I'm not sure I'll be able to get it into a place that I think works well. Well, maybe doing some really like basic clothing over top will help. So let's try a couple clothing designs for these characters. So with this tall skinny one, I was thinking more of this bottom thing where there's kind of baggy clothing overlapping quite a bit, maybe like kind of a poncho type deal. I probably should decide on where this character is from and what their culture is like when coming up with the clothing, but sometimes it can work fine to come at it the other way around, come up with their design first and then decide on culture afterwards based on that design. Since I'm still working on the overall world building as well, it can often be a way for me to kind of get started in that. These clothing designs I'm doing are going to be potentially too unique to not stand out in a crowd. But if I do design culture around whatever I design for this character's clothing, then I can make that culture common in like the main kind of setting where this character mostly shows up. And then that way all of the random, civilians in background, a lot of them can have similar clothing, which will make this character stand out less in the end. So I do think the clothing kind of helped make this body shape work a little bit better. But let's move on to the next and see. So this one, I kind of like the idea of it having what are like the British police called. They have like these coats with the like raincoats with the shoulder flaps kind of hanging over. Scotland Yard type idea. Could be fun for this kind of character. It looks like maybe what I'm looking for is called an ulster coat, this kind of thing. Kind of use that as a bit of a base for it. I can already tell that despite generally liking this design overall, it's not what I'm looking for this character. And I already have a couple characters that are sort of similarly designed, similarly built, so I think it would be just a little too much of the same thing. So I'm just gonna stop with that and not put too much more time into it and move on to this last one that is kind of back to my original design. I think this is maybe just too much like the old design, so I'm going to try copying this body shape and doing another clothing pass. Maybe something a bit more unique, culturally speaking, not just like regular Western dude with a long coat. This one I'm thinking something that is like still looks upper class, I guess. Like he's a rich person, but not from a Western style culture. So looking a little bit too much like a dress. I think the puffy sleeves aren't helping with that. I think something like that could be interesting. Definitely like it more than the previous just Western long jacket. And I think I do like it more than the tall skinny with baggy clothing option. So I'm going to move that and try one more of these, continuing this exploration into another culture. Not sure about sleeves on this design with the kind of baggy open sides like this, but I'm gonna try something, see how it works. I like this one being sort of a mix between opulent, flowy, impractical kind of clothing, like in this center shirt piece, while also being almost militaristic, tight, well-fitting jacket and pants. Maybe from like a fairly strict and military-focused culture where this restraint is seen as positive, but where the rich nobility also adds their own flourishes to show off. Ooh, I like that idea. These sleeves being kind of like extra long cufflink style, where they're sort of wrapped around and then buttoned together on the one side. I feel like this design is missing the flowing downwards stuff that these designs have with the long coats that I kind of like for this character, but I'm not sure there's any easy way to add that in. This, whatever this flowing shirt is, could drape down as like a cape, but that feels a little too cheesy. This sort of corset kind of part of the jacket could maybe have a skirt part to it. It's not quite the same as having that whole flowing jacket or like skirt thing that the other ones have. But I do think I kind of like this. Gives it just a little bit more interest in like the silhouette. Maybe this front part is kind of buttoned over top of the jacket going in behind. I do like to try, if I can, to make sense of what the actual tailoring is doing. For some things, it's a little more obvious than others. For this one, I feel like I'd need to do some sketches on like this section here, how that works. Because I feel like maybe this front panel is a separate piece that buttons onto the jacket, and then maybe it's just this loose cloth shirt is attached to this front piece, and it kind of goes over top of the jacket, and maybe this whole jacket piece is actually all one piece that connects up to the sleeves. In which case, like this shirt thing, maybe in the back, it kind of, maybe it comes around and kind of buttons together somehow. I mean, it could just all be one piece that you slip over top of your head too, like an actual shirt. But anyway, I do think overall each of these designs kind of got better and better as I went, and it might be useful for me to keep going in this direction and see where it leads me, but probably not going to go any further on this right now, and just leave it up to you guys, the viewers, to tell me what you think of these designs so far. Did you prefer any one over the others? Do you think I should stick with what I've got on the left here, this half military, half nobility styled thing? Should I maybe go back to one of these other two, maybe different clothing but this body shape? Do you think I should maybe stick to kind of what I had in the original design, something a little bit more Western? Let me know what you think. This is going to be a bit of a weird one in that I didn't actually get a finished piece of art, but let me know if you like this kind of process thing, and if you enjoy the idea of being a part of the process and being able to give feedback before I finish a piece. And yeah, I'll try to take your guys' feedback on this design and implement it for the next video. So yeah, thanks for watching me explore another hobby. Like and subscribe if you want to see where this goes next time, and have a good one.